two different issues that we are going to speak today. Number one, the failure of the president to respond to this crisis. As more and more children from Central America migrate to our borders in search for opportunity, safety, and secure family structure they so deserve, our country is faced with a dire humanitarian crisis.
We are told the president is doing everything he can to stem the tide of what you can either call illegal immigrants or refugees into America. We are told America is warning people in Central America not to send their children here, for they will be turned back. And we are also being bombarded with reports of disease spreading due to those now with temporary residence in various shelters. Fact from fiction and where this story goes from here. Welcome into MidPoint, nationally syndicated columnist with the Washington Post Writers Group. He's joined us before. Ruben Navarette Jr. is with us again today. Ruben, thanks for being with us.
Good to be with you.
Ruben, let's start right out with some breaking news here. The president was looking to seek $2 billion from Congress for border control. Within the last hour, the news has come out that he is now seeking almost $4 billion, $3.8 billion. The move is aimed at more quickly deporting the tens of thousands of women and children who have entered the country illegally across the southern border. In your opinion, is doubling this going to do anything at all? And what is your immediate reaction to the president now asking for $3.8 billion?
My first reaction is the president's really struggling with this issue. He has struggled with immigration all 5 years of his presidency. He's struggling with this issue. They can't find a narrative they want to stick to. They keep moving all over the board. They had various explanations at the White House as to why this was happening. Now they have various explanations about what they're going to do in response to it happening. You heard just before your show the news item that said that the president is backing off his attempt to fast track these deportations. But I'm with you. I don't think that's happening. I think he was right the first time when he said he was going to fast track these deportations by trying to circumvent due process for the unaccompanied minors. So the president is really caught in a pickle. He really wants to get rid of these kids. It's a political problem for him. It's a big political problem for Democrats in Washington right before the November elections. And so they've got to get rid of these kids as fast as they can across the border. But that's not happening so quickly, and it's not happening easily. And the activists on the left are rattling their sabers as well. And so the president is really trying to have it both ways and trying to pretend that he's going to be finding ways for these kids to stay, when in reality, you and I both know he's going to try to get rid of them.
Is almost $4 billion going to get the job done, doubling it up, or are we just throwing money out there that, quite frankly, will still take time in order for anything to get done? Because it's not as if you flip the switch and all of a sudden tens of thousands of immigrant children and their parents are heading back to South America.
So let me tell you a story. It goes this way. The basic misconception is somehow that we can fix the border and make it more secure by throwing money at it. One of the things that's interesting in the past, every time we've spent money on the border, the one group that celebrates are the cartels, the smuggling cartels south of the border. Because whereas a month ago they used to charge $3,000 to come across, now because the president's done this, they're going to raise their rates to $6,000. They're going to be able to tell everybody it's more difficult to get across because look what Obama did. So it's really a broken system when you are fighting an enemy, in this case the cartels, and every time you spend more money, it empowers and emboldens them. And so the more money we spend on the border, the more difficult we make it to secure the border.
Ruben, you recently wrote a column that asked the question, is mob rule now the American way? And I want to just sit there for 1 second because I want to look at some numbers here as well. If you look at the illegal immigrant population by state in 2012, it sometimes is astounding because people are looking at numbers that I don't think they were really fully aware of. In California, a quarter of the illegal population, Texas 16%, Florida 6%, New York 5%, New Jersey 4%, other states smaller and smaller. So the illegal immigrant population by state is growing. Now, you have what many people consider, and let's go to Murrieta, California. The people there consider more illegals are coming into the country at this point. They're angry. They protested. They went out. They threw signs up at the buses. They yelled. They screamed. Send them back. And I want to get now to your is mob rule now the American way? I know that you are very critical of what they did at Murrieta, California and other places, but does this not just show an innate frustration from American citizens, from the people who are here, that nothing is being done, so they need to take matters into their own hands?
Absolutely. Just like in the 1960s, it showed a frustration on the part of white Southerners who were frustrated at attempts by the federal government to impose desegregation orders, to admit people like James Meredith to the University of Mississippi, to integrate the high school in Little Rock. And just like in those cases, those people were frustrated and they felt the federal government wasn't listening to them. So they went up and they took matters into their own hands. And when they did, the proper response was that the Kennedy brothers, Robert Kennedy, the Attorney General, and John Kennedy, sent in the federal marshals. And that's what needs to happen now. President Obama needs to send in the federal marshals to protect these federal vehicles, these federal agents, as they carry out a federal mission. And it's cut and dried. The fact is, they have arrest authority. The marshals can arrest people. To those people who think that's might inflame things, it never happens that way. Cops actually are supposed to quell things. You start arresting people, and those protesters will think twice about challenging federal authority.
Will they really think twice, though? Because, and I want to go back to one of the lines that you had in here. You said in the meltdown at Murrieta, it was the chanting of USA, USA that was the most offensive, as if mob rule is the American way and wrapping yourself in the flag gives you license to wipe your feet on some of our most sacred traditions. But even if these people are arrested, again, this comes down to it may seem offensive, but what else do these people have to fall back on, Ruben?
Well, one thing they should do is do what the mayor claims he meant all along. Alan Long claims that what he said was, I wanted them to make their voices heard. They can make their voices heard without standing physically in front of federal law enforcement vehicles. And, we're all grown-ups. We understand that when we challenge authorities and we challenge law enforcement, we tend to get arrested. When we defy the federal government on April 15th and we don't file our taxes, we definitely get arrested. We get audited, we get brought into court. So when you challenge the federal government and literally stand in front of a vehicle, you don't get to say later, well, I was frustrated, I didn't know what I was doing. When you break the law, according to the rules of civil disobedience, the great traditions of this country, you go to jail.
But we are a nation that protests. We are a nation that indeed takes out, we vent ourselves in protest in many ways, positively and negatively. It is all these people feel they have right now because, as you say, you can go do it other ways. You can go to your government. You can go to your local governments, the federal government. But these people feel as if the federal government has completely abandoned them. So they see this as their last resort to say something and at least bring some attention to the crisis. Wouldn't you say in that instance they have succeeded?
They have succeeded in bringing attention to the fact that they lined up in those videos that we've all seen and terrorized young kids and mothers on buses. It doesn't take a very big man to do that. That is what they drew attention to.
Well, wait a minute. Were they really terrorizing the kids? Did you really want to use the word terrorizing?
Yeah, I use it well. I use it for a reason. There were members of Congress, Juan Vargas, who's a congressman from San Diego, interviewed some of the kids. He claimed that those kids were terrified of the mob, and they felt that they were going to be handed over, in essence, to these people who were waving placards. And the protesters later said, well, we weren't protesting against the kids, but when you're 6, 7, 8, 9 years old and you're on a bus and you see these people yelling and screaming, waving their fists at your bus, you don't really know that. You don't really get the idea that they're yelling at Washington. If these people want to say something, they should go to Washington. But what really the point here is that if they want to adhere to this great American tradition of protest, they need to read the whole book, not just the beginning. And the whole book says that when you commit an act of civil disobedience, as Henry David Thoreau did, as Martin Luther King did, those people went to jail. The letter from the Birmingham jail, which is all about civil disobedience, was written from jail. Hello. So that's the other part of it. People want to have the cake without the calories. They want to have the protest and not get arrested. It doesn't work that way, folks. If you want to practice civil disobedience, you get arrested.
Does the government, though, bear some responsibility in this? And again, looking at both sides of this, the government and the people there know that there are these protests there. They know that there are people there. They know that there could be people there that are armed. There's been no actual fact that we've seen this. Some people say that there are armed militia there. They know that they're doing this. Is it not then the government's responsibility to not drive these buses into these groups and into these demonstrations where, in essence, they are helping to foster that, as you called it, the terrorism of the children and the people on the buses?
Yeah, that would give into something called a heckler's veto. Basically, because we're going to be there to intimidate you and push you back, you ought not complete the mission in the first place. We don't do that. We don't negotiate with terrorists, domestic or foreign. And in fact, when these people did this, they took this position that they're going to try to bully the U.S. government. Again, where I sit, as the son of a cop who was on the job for 37 years, and as someone who's really terrified of my government, I pay my taxes on time. I don't defy federal marshals. When a federal officer tells me to move, I move. Am I the only one who does this? Am I the only bozo on the bus? I'm the only person who respects the federal government and doesn't defy law enforcement officers? When you do that, when you defy a federal law enforcement officer, you go to jail.
You use the word terrified by government. Is that what we want our people to feel? Being terrified by their government?
That is true in every administration. I think if you feel that the government is not someone to be messed with, that when an FBI agent comes to your house to do an investigation and you have a legal right not to talk to that person, but you also feel that you want to be cooperative with the FBI because you fear the power of the FBI, or the power of the U.S. Attorney's Office or the power of any federal agency, including the IRS, that is something that's true, Republican, Democrat alike. That is something that citizens often feel a sense of intimidation by the federal government. What I'm saying is we typically arrest people in this country. You know who we arrest? We arrest dreamers and immigrant activists who occupy members of Congress's offices in Congress. They occupy an office, they get jailed. They stand up in front of the White House, they tie themselves to the front gate, and they get jailed. So those people get arrested. And what people are asking at all over the country is it the case now that in Barack Obama's America, we don't go up to Marietta, California, where we had a mostly white crowd. We don't arrest white people anymore because the jails are all full with little brown people that Barack Obama has put there. Is that where we've arrived now? That the only people who have to worry about being arrested and jailed when they defy federal authority are these poor immigrant kids, but the protesters in Marietta get off scot-free? That's not America. All
right, Ruben Navarette Jr., it is always a pleasure to have you on the show. You always bring a fiery perspective to the program and to the issue here of immigration. We thank you very much. We'll do it again real soon, Ruben.
Thank you, Ed.
Coming up next, is it smart politics for a possible presidential contender to stand on the side of a person many see as an American traitor? Think about that for a moment. This is MidPoint, where every day we question everything.